Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar, which is Adapting to Long-Term Health Conditions, a reflection of bathroom design. I just wanted to go through I should probably say before I start, my name's Lucy Leonard and I'm the Clinical Director with the OT service. I've been an occupational therapist for 23 years, I think it is now, mostly working with people in their own homes, equipment and adaptations, and working in housing, and I also undertake some vocational rehabilitation as well. So I just wanted to give a bit of background about me. So the learning outcomes today are to consider the challenges and opportunities of proactive future proofing, reflecting on your clinical reasoning, any relevant legislation and sources of funding. To discuss strategies that support cost-effective adaptability, including equipment and adaptations, and briefly reflect on whether there is any conflict to occupational therapy practice in making predictive recommendations that are not necessarily activity analysis based. I've got about 30 minutes to talk to you today, so it is going to be a brief overview of the learning outcomes, but I am going to make suggestions for further reading if there are any particular topics that you might be interested in that I cover today. So just starting off with some definitions of long-term conditions, because I think it's really important that we're clear on what we're saying. So long-term conditions have been defined by the Department of Health as chronic diseases and conditions for which there is currently no cure, which are managed with drugs and other treatment. And they've given some examples such as diabetes, COPD, arthritis, and hypertension. And this is a little bit dated, this data, but they estimate there's about 15 million people in England, not in the UK, in England, that have a long-term condition. As an occupational therapist, I think that's quite a medically focused definition of a long-term condition. And I think as part of our intervention and our referral pathway, we often get a huge range of people referred to us who have long-term conditions that I don't necessarily think would fit in that definition by the Department of Health. So, for example, I work with people who have had an amputation, either through illness or injury, and that could be seen as a long-term condition, which they might not necessarily be receiving any treatment for, especially medical treatments, but it will impact on their ability to undertake daily occupations such as transfers and bathroom occupation. So I think we just need to broaden the scope of what we see as a long-term condition. Similarly, dementia is another long-term condition that we need to consider, somebody's cognitive impairment and the impact of that on daily occupation. And then just thinking about the children that we might work with who have long-term conditions from birth, which will impact on, again, their ability to undertake their daily occupations, activities, and participate in daily life. So that might be things like cerebral palsy, which they have from birth, which again, they might not necessarily be receiving intervention for, but as an occupational therapist, we can certainly enhance somebody's daily life by our intervention. And then finally, just thinking about things like brain injury, mental health problems, and other cognitive issues that, again, would be classed for me as a long-term condition, but may not necessarily fit that Department of Health definition. So I think it's really important as occupational therapists that what we see as a long-term condition might be slightly different from any definition that we might come across. Sitting outside of the definition of a long-term condition is frailty and aging. And I think it's really important just to touch on the aging process, because if we're thinking about long-term, hopefully we all get older, and as we get older, things change. So I just wanted to touch on frailty. And frailty isn't actually the same thing as living with multiple long-term conditions. Sometimes there is an overlap, but equally somebody living with frailty might not have any other diagnosed health conditions. So what actually is frailty? The British Geriatric Society define frailty as a distinctive health state related to the aging process in which multiple body systems gradually lose their built-in reserves. And they estimated around 10% of people aged over 65 have frailty, rising to about 25 to 50% of those aged over 85. And if you go on the British Geriatric Society website, they do touch on disability as well. And they say that frailty and long-term conditions are not the same as disability, although frailty can cause disability. I've just got some further reading for you there, because frailty and occupational therapy is a huge topic and there isn't enough time to cover it here. So there is some further reading here. It's a really interesting piece that I found on the Royal College of OT website about frailty and using a particular frame of reference there. And also the NHS and Skills for Health have published a document on frailty, which is really interesting, and I would direct you in to those documents if you want to read further. So it's important to think about ourselves as occupational therapists and what we're here to do. And I often look to the Royal College of Occupational Therapy for guidance about things. So what do they say about long-term conditions? Well, what they say about occupational therapy is that we help people with physical disabilities and long-term conditions to get the most out of life. That's a really short but succinct and accurate description of what we try and do. Is we try and get people to help people get the most out of life. But the emphasis on occupational therapy intervention is often on finding that optimal level, whatever the barrier is. So that often means looking at how an activity or the physical or social environment it takes place in can be modified or adapted to make things easier. Just as importantly, the occupational therapist will discuss how someone feels about their ability to tackle their problems. So that, in a nutshell, is a way of assessing somebody. So looking at the activity, the different environments it takes place in, and seeing if that can be modified. So thinking about bathroom adaptations, what we need to do is understand the person. I'm going to go on to this later in the case study. Understand the person, the occupation that they're trying to undertake, and the environment in which that occupation is performed in. And then we look at the occupational performance and try and optimize that as an occupational therapist. Occupational therapists, and this is really important, see beyond diagnoses and limitations to hopes and aspirations. Occupational therapists look at the relationships between the activities you do every day, which are your occupations, alongside the challenges you face and your environment. And I really like that definition, because as an occupational therapist, I think it's really important to understand somebody's diagnosis, because maybe reading their medical history or understanding from the referral what their diagnosis is, you can kind of get to build a little bit of a picture of the challenges that they may face. But what we should be doing is, more importantly, is looking at what somebody's hopes and aspirations are. And that sounds a really big, broad, almost spiritual thing, but it can be something really small, like I really like to be able to use the toilet independently without my husband having to help, or I would really like to be able to access the bath in order to have a soak to help with my pain. And so, as well as thinking about long-term conditions and assessing those and understanding those, we really need to be asking people what their hopes and aspirations are. And I like to think, when I go in and start an initial assessment, I often ask the person, what do you want? What's important to you? What matters to you? How can I help you? Rather than what are your signs and symptoms? And so when you understand what somebody's aspirations are, you can then start to build appropriate intervention for them. So activity analysis is an absolute core part of what we do as occupational therapists. And I think it's really important just to touch on this and remind us as occupational therapists on such an important topic and something that should be guiding our assessment and our intervention. And any of you that have been to university, or maybe you're at university now, will know Hagedorn, who said the analysis of occupations and their use within therapy are the unique skills of the occupational therapist. And there's a few more quotes about activity analysis here. Activity analysis is the requirements for a successful performance of the activity, the process of breaking down an activity into steps and detailed subparts and examining its components. And it's used both in preparing occupations to be used during intervention and to identify barriers to participation in occupations. And I think in an initial assessment or an ongoing assessment, that's a really important part of the understanding of somebody's ability to engage in occupation. It's looking at those barriers. So why isn't somebody able to access their bathroom? Why isn't somebody able to undertake the occupation of toileting independently? Why is somebody relying and putting a carer at risk whilst they're stepping into the bath? So I think activity analysis is an absolutely essential part to not only understanding somebody's needs, but being able then to make appropriate recommendations for the immediate term and for the long term. So I did say that I was going to touch briefly on legislation, and I think it's difficult without knowing everybody's background and where you work. So I've covered a few different things, but I think those working in local authorities or social services or social care backgrounds will be aware of the Care Act. And I think the important part of the Care Act with regards to long-term conditions, and obviously it's a huge piece of legislation to go into here when I've only got 30 minutes, but an important part of the Care Act is the prevention part of it, and it's often broken down into 3 approaches, which are primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. And I think the most important bit that I picked out with regard to long-term conditions and occupational therapy was secondary prevention. And these are more targeted interventions aimed at individuals who have an increased risk of developing needs, where the provision of services, resources, or facilities may help slow down or reduce any further deterioration or prevent needs from developing. So sometimes when we're undertaking an initial assessment, we are having to make some predictions about the future. And that can be a really tricky situation, because not only do you have to discuss with the person a potential deterioration in their condition in the future, but we do have to consider what may happen, almost a worst case scenario really, and discuss that in a really sensitive way with the client. But the Care Act supports us to do that, because it says that interventions should be considered that help prevent other needs from developing. So if you think about somebody with a long-term condition such as motor neurone disease, for example, which is a long-term condition that does unfortunately deteriorate over time, we as occupational therapists need to undertake that activity analysis of somebody's bathroom occupations and understand them, but also think about how is this person managing now, and what is the likelihood of how they will manage next week, next month, next year, and work in partnership with that person to adapt their bathroom accordingly and almost future-proof any adaptations so that things can be added and modified as their disease or their long-term condition progresses. And I think that can be a really difficult thing to discuss with a client. It takes real skill. And again, in the case study that I'm going to cover later, I cover this in the initial assessment process about building that rapport with somebody and actually being truthful and honest in a really sensitive way about how they may change over time. So those working in social care or possibly in the NHS and undertaking adaptations that are funded by a disabled facilities grant, I thought I'd just cover a little bit on what the legislation says. So hopefully we all know that the main definition of our occupational therapy intervention with regards to a DFG is we assess what is reasonable and appropriate and necessary and practicable. So we work very closely with local authorities, with technical officers to make recommendations about adaptations. And sometimes it's important for us to act as an advocate for the clients, because having worked in a number of different local authorities, sometimes the gatekeepers of the DFG don't always think the same as an occupational therapist, as a clinician. And often we are asking for funding for long-term conditions when the person is actually managing at the moment, but we are aware that their condition will change over time. And I think it's really important that we advocate for our clients to make sure that any DFG money is being spent is appropriate and reflects any potential changes to that person's condition over time. And actually, by doing that, we are backed up by the legislation, the DFG legislation, because it says authorities should consider how to achieve value for money, taking into account how to design adaptations that will meet current and anticipated future needs. So that's the little bit of legislation that you can use in any clinical reasoning to say, well, actually, I'm anticipating this person's future health needs, and therefore I am recommending that a ceiling track hoist is provided at this point, or a Closomat wash dry toilet is provided at this point, although they can just about manage their personal hygiene after using the toilet. I predict that in the near future they will start to struggle. So that's quite useful to put in your clinical reasoning. And for those of you maybe working in independent practice or alongside case managers, I'm just going to quickly cover the rehab code in terms of funding. So the rehab code says the purpose of the personal injury claims process is to restore an individual to, as much as possible, to the position that they were in before the accident. The code provides a framework for the claimant solicitor and compensator to work together to ensure that the claimant's health, quality of life, independence, and ability to work are restored before or simultaneously with the process of assessing compensation. So I also want to take some private intervention that's funded through litigation, and that's very much the focus, is about looking at the individual, assessing their quality of life, their ability to engage in daily occupation, and trying to provide intervention that gets them to as close as where they were pre-accident or pre-injury as possible. Okay, so I'm just aware that there's a lot of things to cover before I actually get to the design, a bathroom design. So I'm going to start talking now about the design of a bathroom and adaptations and things to consider, which hopefully you can take some hints and tips away from. One of the things I get asked a lot about is pocket doors for access to bathrooms. And if you're not aware, but a pocket door is a sliding door that slides in between into the wall, so it completely doesn't take up any room either inside the bathroom or on the landing or in the hallway. And they're a great way for ensuring that there's maximum space in the room. The only thing to consider is that if the door goes wrong or needs repairing, it's quite difficult to get inside the mechanism to repair it. So that's just one consideration. But I've done a number of these pocket sliding doors. They're really good if there's additional building works going on in the property, and things can be made to measure, if you like, because sometimes it's quite difficult to put a pocket door on an existing bathroom. Automated doors are also really useful for wheelchair users, because opening a door whilst you're in a wheelchair and then reversing and then going through the door and trying to turn around and close the door behind you can be really difficult. So automated doors are a fantastic way of enabling somebody's autonomy and independence and not having them rely on anybody else to access the bathroom, and actually promoting privacy and dignity as well. Because often when I assess people, you find that because they're struggling, they're leaving the door open in the bathroom and things like that. So they're a fantastic way of enabling independence. And then the other thing is just the standard sliding door, which slides on the outside of the wall, and you can see there. It is more, I think it is less costly than a pocket door and can easily be fitted retrospectively. And when we're planning for the long term and for long-term conditions, sometimes we have to think about possible electrical adaptations. So thinking about where electrics are required in the bathroom, and here there's a height adjustable sink there, height adjustable basin, which will require, because it works on electrics, it will require a fuse spare. So if we are not necessarily putting in a height adjustable basin at that time, if we're looking at somebody's bathroom, it's important to consider that may be required in the future. And again, thinking about a Closomat toilet, that's a picture there of a fuse spare next to a Closomat going in. And even if the person doesn't require the Closomat toilet at this point, it's important to think about the future, possible deterioration. If they're not willing or ready to accept, or it's not appropriate to put such adaptations in at that time, we can future-proof and think, how easy would it be if the fuse spare is there already? So many times my adaptations, I put a fuse spare, not working alongside the technical officer or the architect, just to future-proof. When we're thinking about the structural considerations as well, and we're not experts in the structure of buildings, but it's important to know this sort of thing. If somebody potentially might require a hoist in the future, we need to think about the joists and whether they would be strong enough to take a ceiling track hoist in the future, and if not, can we strengthen the hoist so that when it does come to the point where somebody needs a ceiling track hoist, it can easily go in. And the other thing is, how does ceiling track hoist go from room to room? So for example, if you have somebody's bedroom with an ensuite, and you know that they're going to need to be hoisted straight from bed into a bathroom, we need to think about how that rail is going to get through into the bathroom. And there are lots of different ways to do that, but we can always defer to our colleagues who work for the ceiling track hoist companies, who will be able to give us more advice on that. And also, if we're thinking about baths over time, especially specialist baths which have a mechanism that raises and lowers the bath, they are a lot heavier than standard baths, and consideration needs to be made if you put in a specialist bath on a first floor, especially it's really heavy when you fill it with water. So that's something to think about, the structure of the floor as well as the structure of the ceiling. And I worked in paediatric adaptations for a number of years, and we would often put height adjustable changing benches in the bathroom. And you have to think about the structure of the wall as well. So we've done floor, we've done ceiling, and now we have to think about the structure of the wall, because the these take quite a lot of weight, especially because they've got a mechanism again which lifts and lowers. So we need to work with our colleagues, the architects and technical officers, to understand the structure of the wall and if it can take this sort of adaptation. So there are some items as well that may be used as somebody's condition changes over time. For example, a shower chair that may go over the toilet or over a Closomat. So we need to think about the height of that shower chair, the position of the toilet, whether it's close to the wall. And these are the aerolets which I know Closomat provide, which have been really useful for some of my clients with deteriorating conditions such as muscular dystrophy and other neurological disorders, where they get to the point where they can transfer on and off the toilet, and then a raised toilet seat's added, and that enables them to transfer for some time. But as they deteriorate, these the aerolet helps them to actually stand up from sit to stand or from stand to sit, and it enables that independence and maintains dignity and independence when toileting. So they've been a really fantastic addition for some of my bathroom adaptations. So there's other things to consider in terms of bathroom adaptations over time. And there's far too much to cover here. I'm literally just giving you an overview, but we also need to think about things like lighting. If somebody's eyesight might deteriorate over time. So contrasting switches, non-glare lights. Think about natural light, which isn't always a good thing if it's a south-facing room, because it can sometimes be too bright. Can you have lighting sensors that come on when automatically when somebody comes into the room? I've done that with some of my clients who use a wheelchair, and as soon as they go into the bathroom, the lights come on, which has been really helpful. Think about contrasting surfaces and colours. So don't have a white floor and a white toilet for somebody with visual problems. And then heating. Bathrooms are often cold places, so we need to think about keeping people warm. Often people with long-term conditions and disabilities take longer to get dry and get dressed, so we need to think about keeping that room nice and warm. And also, if we're looking at underfloor heating, we need to think about where adaptations might go in the future and the impact of that on underfloor heating, because it's often electric. So you can't just screw things into the floor when there's underfloor heating there. Don't forget, we need to think about enough space for storage for things like incontinence pads and makeup and smellies and all the things that we use in the bathroom, and making sure there's enough space for carers as well. I said I was going to touch on this, and I'm really aware of the time, but one of the learning outcomes was to reflect on whether there's any conflict to our practice when we're making predictive recommendations, which aren't based on somebody's current activity analysis. But research from the Health Foundation estimates that if people who feel less able to manage their long-term conditions were supported to manage them as well as those who feel most able, it would reduce emergency admissions and A&E attendances. And also in our code of conduct, it says you intervene as early as possible to optimize outcomes and reduce, delay, or prevent future needs where possible. So that is part of our professional standards and code of conduct and ethics. And the World Federation of Occupational Therapy said occupational therapists have a key role in empowering older adults in healthy aging by enabling occupations as well as environments which support occupation throughout the lifespan. Okay, I think that they're the important words there, throughout the lifespan. I've just got a couple of minutes to touch on the case study. So this is a 36-year-old female diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She's had a recent rapid deterioration in her upper and lower limbs. She's struggling with transfers, intermittently using a wheelchair, but struggling to accept changes in her condition. So as part of the assessment process, I did mention it before, but I think it's really important that we build a rapport with somebody to enable them to share their hopes, their aspirations, their fears, and build up a little bit of trust with us as their occupational therapists, and trust us with being able to share some of the difficulties that they might be having in the bathroom. It's really difficult sometimes for women to share how they're managing menstruation, wiping themselves. So it's really important that they trust us to share that information. So we need to listen really carefully. We need to understand their diagnosis, and we need to ask about what they feel the future might hold, as well as what their current function is as well. So what are their long-term plans? What do they see as their plans? What are their carers' plans? What support do they have now, and what will they have in the future? And what intervention have they had already? And with this particular lady, she had a couple of children, so that was important to understand the children's use of the bathroom and the carer and the support that the carer gave her. And what occupations did she undertake in the bathroom? What was her routine? What's the layout of the bathroom and the location of the bathroom within the property? So these are really all important things to pick up on the initial assessment. So a bathroom adaptation was undertaken for this lady, and she had a height adjustable basin, so she was able to use it in seating from her wheelchair on bad days and also from standing. We had to maintain access to the bath for the children because the children were bathed as part of their nightly routine, but a fuse spare was added near to the bath for future possible need for a height adjustable bath. A pocket sliding door was put in, as well as a level access shower area, so she had a bath and a shower. Fuse spare next to the toilet. Because of the deterioration in her upper limbs, it was likely that she was going to need a Closomat toilet in the future. Plenty of storage in the bathroom for the kids' things and for her smellies and etc. And thinking about the future, again, the ceiling, making sure it was suitable for a ceiling track hoist, the fuse spare for the Closomat, and any potential turning space for a mobile shower chair. And this last picture that I'm finishing with is an example of a really nice looking bathroom and what can be achieved through adaptations. They don't need to look clinical. And this is a really interesting quote that says, "Products are more than the sum of the functions they perform. Their real value can be in fulfilling people's emotional needs. And one of the most important needs for all is to establish one's self-image and one's place in the world." And a 36-year-old lady with MS, she has a self-image. She wanted to have a nice bathroom. She wanted to have the pocket door and lots of space. And so it's really important to take those things into consideration when we're future planning the bathroom for long-term conditions. I've slightly gone over time, I do apologise, but there are the references, and you will get a copy of the presentation. Thank you for listening.
Hi everybody, I'm Dale from Pressulit. I'm the OT contact here at Pressulit, and today I'm going to give you a quick introduction to our range of adjustable bathroom products and just tell you a little bit about how they can help you and your clients by offering flexibility and adjustability, but also create value by offering space saving as well in the bathroom. So firstly, I'm going to talk a little bit about our Plus shower range here. It's a bathroom system that you can have wash basin, shower support arms on, toilet support arms, sorry, and shower seats. Great thing with the Plus system is you can have them at a fixed position. So if you've got a user where you know their needs aren't going to change, you can have a fixed grab rail or shower seat. But we also offer height adjustments on them and horizontal and vertical adjustment too. So we can really personalise it and get this right for them. And you can put as much adjustability or as flexibility as you require into this. So first, you're probably wondering why you're going to want to have all the flexibility. Well, I'll show you a little bit with these support arms first. So it's quite important, as you know, when somebody's on the toilet, they need support to perhaps get off the toilet. And if the grab rail's not set at the correct height, as you can see here, my arms are locked straight, but my legs aren't, and I'm struggling to move forward. So if we can set the grab rail at the correct height for the user, this is really good where we've got more than one user perhaps using the bathroom, or maybe as they grow or they need to change, we can set the grab rail to the correct height, they've got their legs locked, they're now safe to move forward. What you may also notice is these grab rails project a little bit further than standard grab rail. So it gives me room here at the end of the toilet to turn to support myself without having the toilet digging into my legs or reaching too far back. Another feature of the Plus support arms is we have a definite raised end here. So for the users, perhaps someone who's partially sighted, they know when they've got to the end of the grab rail, but also they can use it to pull themselves forward to get into the correct position. These rails also come with a soft closed facility. A lot of the arms don't and they drop down. It's quite important when you're reaching behind you to get to the rail that it isn't going to come down too quick and hit the user. And finally, as you can probably see here with the Plus range, we have a range of different colours, the grey, the white, the green, blues and reds. So colour differentiation can work really well with a user who's partially sighted, or maybe your clients just want to personalise, brighten up their bathroom and go for something a bit more personal really. Now, one final feature with the Plus system is that the products, when they're mounted on the horizontal track, they're easily adjusted without any tools, but they can also be easily removed. So the reason you can take the rail off here, you might have this in more than one room, so you don't have to buy grab rails for every room. We can use them where they're needed, they can be taken out, or depending on the layout, the grab rail can be moved into the front of the shower seat to give frontal support as well. So when we're talking about the shower area, again, we have similar level of adjustment with the shower seat. You can have a fixed height, you can have vertical adjustment, or you can have horizontal. The horizontal adjustment, again, in a multi-user area, can come in really well as it enables you to have one shower area for dependent or independent users. You may also be working with a client whose perhaps needs are going to change over time. At the moment, they're able to sit and shower independently, so they can reach the controls here and have the shower chair in the corner. But maybe at a later date or even later in the day, they might need assistance. So you may want to move the shower seat out into an island position. So there's room then for the carer and someone who's assisting to get both sides of help. Equally, if we're using this in quite a small bathroom with a dependent user, or we're trying to save space and not be knocking walls out, then when they finish, you can move the shower chair into the corner, which then creates more space, perhaps for turning circles or for transfer to the toilet. The vertical adjustment, again, this moves up quite easily, so it's important that we can set a chair at the correct height for a shower user. So they've sat there, they've got the legs straight, they've got their feet sat on the floor, so they feel very safe, and everything's nice and secure. Finally, I'm just talking about the shower seats. We do offer a further version of this. I don't have it here today to show you, but we do have a mobile version I can bring out, where the seat can be adjusted with powered adjustment. So that's really good if you've got somebody who's trying to stay independent, but is perhaps not very stable. So they can bring the chair to a nice height, they can perch on it, then using the remote, they can lower themselves down to a position that's comfortable for showering, and even lower down so they can safely lean forward without losing their balance and falling off. You can also see here at the side of me, we do have a smaller version of the shower seat, the 310, which works better really with children and small adults. But I do find with teenagers, they're growing, usually they'll grow more into the 450 version. So I'm going to finish in the shower area now. I'm going to quickly look at wash basins. I think washing and hand washing, a bit like toileting, it's probably the two parts of the bathroom that people use the most. So it's very important that people can have access to the basin. First of all, just having the basin at the correct height is really useful. So it could be that you're dealing at the moment with a project where we're looking at children or wheelchair users, they may want the wash basin lower, but that then doesn't help mum and dad, carers or siblings and partners who may want to bring the basin or need the basin in a higher position. Equally fine nowadays, a lot of people with different conditions, they have a powered wheelchair. A lot of the powered wheelchairs tend to be higher, so we might want the basin higher, or even an ambulant user might want the basin up to the highest position so they've got something sturdy to lean on to. As I mentioned with the shower area earlier, you could be dealing with a mix of independent and dependent users. And for a dependent user, we're going to want space around the basin, but with an independent user who's on the toilet, they may want to bring hand washing within reach of the toilet, The Plus system gives you the flexibility to have the basin up here, so somebody can independently wash their hands before they transfer into their wheelchair and put their clothes on. Also, though, where we're looking at, and it's quite a common thing in the UK, quite small bathroom spaces, you may need the space here at the side to get to the toilet to help, or for the wheelchair user just to have space to get to access the basin. So we can use the basin here over the shower area, but then when we need to shower, carer can move the basin up to the toilet, giving you a large shower area here. So again, it's using the system to give you more space, create flexibility, and hopefully value for money for the clients. And while we're here, I'll quickly show you, this is our matrix basin. So this is a part of the Plus range. This is a larger width basin. It's powered height adjustable. The difference really with the powered and the manual adjusted basins is where we're going to be wanting to adjust the basin regularly, maybe for somebody who comes in the morning, perhaps in a wheelchair, but later on they might be able to walk. If we're dealing with a child and they want the basin lower and it's higher, if you're adjusting the basin regularly, powered height is really the way forward. The manual adjustment only really comes into its own where we only need to adjust the basin occasionally. Perhaps as somebody's growing, there's a need to change over a period of years. As I say, matrix basin has got a good range of height adjustment there. It's got a larger surface area, so you can have all your soaps and toothbrushes and accessories on there and all within reach while washing. So final part of the presentation, I'm just going to come over and show you a little bit now with our shower change tables. Presently we have a range of mobile and wall mounted. Today I've got the wall mounted one here, the 3000. So this is a height adjustable table. Gives you one 700mm of height adjustment. So it starts quite high, so it works well with carers at different length, different heights, different abilities. The table goes quite low as well. So it's quite a soft area here for the client to lay on. It is curved, so it helps them keep them in the middle, keep them stable, but also can help when you're turning the user for washing and showering. We have the safety rail here, so just make sure nobody can roll off, but also they can see it, it helps somebody keep safe there. And as you can see, there's got a little cutout in the middle here. This works really well for carers to lean over to help them access. And depending on the people that are using the bench, quite a lot of people want to be involved in their care. They don't want to be laid flat on the table. So we have the shower raiser here. We can raise it up for the head part, just to make them a bit more involved and perhaps feel a little bit more comfortable. All our shower change table, the shower change table has a water collection unit under here. So when the carer is a showering person, the water goes into the unit and away through the pipe. The carers are not getting wet, and it helps stop making the area, slip or risk. I did mention we have 700mm of height adjustment with this table, and this means we can bring it down to 300mm off the floor. I mean, you might be wondering perhaps why we'd want to go that low with the shower change table. Again, if you're dealing with perhaps a wheelchair user who wants to transfer onto the table, or even children who can crawl and get to it, it's helping keep them mobile and they can get off and on without having to resort to hoisting. We can do hoisting sort of as more of a last resort. I think we're finished there. That's pretty much covered all of our range, hopefully quite quickly for you. The shower change tables, the support arms, shower seat, wash basins. Do have samples of quite a few of these, which we can bring out alongside Closomat to demonstrate with you and for your clients to look at and trial. If you have any more questions, please feel free to contact the guys at Closomat. They'll put you in touch with us, or please have a look at our website where there's videos and installation advice as well. My name's Dave from Presley. Thank you very much. I'll now hand you back over to the guys at Closomat.
Hello, my name is Ray Rochester and I'm a Regional Sales Manager with Closomat, and I will spend the next few minutes taking you through some detail on Closomat, the company, the products and services. Firstly, if you haven't seen it before, this is our company vision, part of our core belief and something that every representative and employee of Closomat subscribe to. It is absolutely why we do what we do every single day. As you probably know, Closomat manufactures the Palma Vita Closomat and a wall-hung version, the Lima Vita, and has been doing so in the UK for 60 years now. As well as that though, you may not be aware that Closomat also supplies, installs and maintains a wider range of products as shown on your screen now. The most commonly specified Closomat is the Palmer Vita. There are now over 60,000 Closomats in use in the UK. The product is the UK's most commonly used wash-dry toilet. It was the very first of its kind and remains the only wash-dry toilet designed specifically for the disabled adaptations market. Of all the wash-dry toilet options available in the UK today, the Closomat has the most effective wash and dry performance, using up to 8 litres of water a minute sprayed directly at the area it's intended to clean. The product can be adapted to suit the client's need with a range of heights, alternative seats, operating methods and supports to suit everyone from a paediatric to a bariatric client. As standard, the Closomat will support a client weighing up to 30 stone. With the Big John seat fitted, it can support a client up to 57 stone. And then Palmer Life, a relatively new concept in toileting, uses the very same toilet and accessories, but is sold with included annual service and warranty for 10 years from the date of install. This gives peace of mind for the client and also for the specifier. At Closomat, we work extensively to take all responsibility away from you for all aspects of specifying the wash-dry toilet. Our nationwide team of assessors are now trained to Trusted Assessor Level 4. They will carry out an assessment of the property, the client and the bathroom. Often this begins with a telephone triage before a decision is taken to visit or carry out a remote assessment. Our assessor will prepare a product specification based upon the needs of the client and to suit the environment, sometimes including an installation survey to identify any challenges that may cause an issue during the installation of the product. At Closomat, we also offer a no quibble guarantee. This means that as long as we have carried out the product assessment, that we guarantee that the product specified will be suitable for the client given their current situation. So if, for example, we specify an incorrect height of a toilet or the wrong seat, we will rectify the error at no further cost to the LA or specifier of the product. As mentioned a moment ago, regardless of how complex the need, our process is followed through from triage to assessment, noting that all on-site assessments follow our COVID secure procedures. Following the assessment, a written quotation is provided for your consideration. We also take responsibility for the installation. That's simple if we're doing it ourselves, but where we are not, we have developed an online installer training program to ensure that whoever fits the product installs it in the safe and correct manner. We also take responsibility for commissioning of every installed Closomat. This is more of a customer care visit during which we will make adjustments to the toilet to make the experience better for the client. At this visit, we can adjust the water temperature and pressure to suit the client needs. We can change the wash and dry times and operating methods as well. To encourage the installer to notify us of the installation immediately or as soon as possible, we have introduced QR codes on the product and packaging so that it is much more efficient getting that information to us. We also commit to carry out that commissioning visit within 10 days of install. Talking a little about service and warranty, it's important to understand there is a major difference between warranty and service warranty. If you use the analogy of a car, if you buy a car with a 5-year warranty and simply drove it around every day and never had it serviced, the likelihood of breakdown increases. If you have the same car serviced every year, you would know that at the point of service, the vehicle is in full working order and the likelihood of breakdown is greatly reduced. At Closomat, all of our service and warranty packages include an annual service of the product by one of our employed engineers. In the unlikely event of a breakdown, often the very same engineer attends to repair the product, and as his vehicle is fully stocked, first-time repair is carried out in almost 100% of cases. This level of service and warranty protects the asset and reduces the likelihood of having to replace the product. From a client's perspective, it also means that they are less likely to suffer from a loss of use of the product, and it means there is less of a burden on you, the professional, and your contractors having to respond to product issues. So once you buy from Closomat, you're done worrying. This is because everything we do, whether that be assessment, advice, support, training, product, service, and warranty, are designed to take all the worry and responsibility out of your hands. Thank you very much for listening.